Hey there, this is Darren, founder at Denzity. Welcome to Denzity Insights, where we interview real estate experts for their expertise and opinions and help you to learn more about all things real estate. The Australian real estate market has always been popular for Hong Kong investors. In this episode, we sit down with Terence Cheung, founder and CEO of Raeon International, a Hong Kong-based overseas real estate investment specialist. We discuss important insights for the Australian market, mortgages and taxes, and how Terence and his team are there to help. Beginning with the macro, we cover the overall market's attractive stability and transparency, taking into consideration the government's pandemic response and variations between regional hotspots. Hope you enjoy. As always, you can find everything we mentioned in this episode in the show notes, including our thoughts, more about the guests, and all the tips and tricks. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button like you mean it to get our regular updates. Now, take a deep breath and buckle up for the show. Hope you enjoy.
Hey Terence.
Hi Darren, how are you, man?
Very, very good. It's actually kind of exciting because I've been trying to find someone to talk about Australia real estate market. And then you guys are one of the best right now. You guys are all over the place in Hong Kong.
Yep.
So thanks so much for having this opportunity together.
No, pleasure is all mine, man. Australia is obviously where I grew up, and I have a lot of things to share.
Mm-hmm. Like I know that you guys do more than Australia, and then Australia obviously you guys are bread and butter.
Yep.
So the obvious question for an investor asked every single day is that why should I invest in Australia among other countries and cities around the world? So what's your perspective to allow the audience to understand why Australia and compared to any other markets?
Look, I wouldn't compare. I wouldn't say one market, Australia, is better than other markets around the world. But however, I'd like to highlight that you invest in Australia for its stability, for transparency in terms of dealing with various governing bodies, signing the contract of sale. The Australian government is very protective in the consumers. Things are heavily regulated, right? And there's a very solid infrastructure and framework in the whole health sector, the education sector, and also the transport industry. Very similar to the UK, Canada, and Australia. I mean, it's all British colonies, right? However, obviously in Australia, there's no guns, so no guns around. It just reduced a lot of that violence at school that you hear, in the rest of the world. And who doesn't want to live in Australia? I mean, sunshine and beach and great food.
I know, right? So, we always, COVID is a big thing happens in the world. And then Australia did a great job to kind of recovering. And then in your perspective, would you mind giving the audience a bit update about the macro perspective of Australia, what you're doing right now, how you're doing during COVID, and then what do you see the outlook?
Although took a lead from New Zealand, I think New Zealand was the best country in terms of controlling COVID effectively and swiftly, right? Basically, they shut their borders straight away. They went into lockdown straight away, and they were able to control it immediately. Australia did the same thing. Australia was slower to react compared to New Zealand, but then they also did had a heavy shutdown in various parts of the states, and in return, the country's back to normal pretty much, right? And the government has allocated quite a lot of budget. The government has allocated a lot of budget to 刺激經濟, to revive the economy by building different infrastructure, creating spendings for small to medium businesses. Interest rate is kept at the lowest it's been ever. There's many stimulus packages available to SMEs. And because of that, the housing market, it's on fire. The local housing market, there's all these grants, all these government grants, all these first home first home owners subsidies. The market's on fire. Yeah.
So right now, there's so many market pumping up in Australia. Like I remember people talking about Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, obviously beyond Sydney and Melbourne.
Yep.
In your perspective, what are some markets that you think is overrated or underrated?
我自己覺得有啲 market 係啲人冇咁熟悉 right? I wouldn't yeah, which is they get less publicity, right? So yeah, underrated such as your Adelaide, your Perth, and Brisbane, right? Now these three cities have performed very well during COVID, right? In terms of one. The local government's able to lock down whatever, control the spread of COVID. But Melbourne City, obviously, Sydney's obviously the biggest city, in Australia, and followed by Melbourne. Now, not everyone locally love working in a fast-paced environment, right? Obviously, 今日聽 radio show, right? 講全球10大最貴城市嘅樓價 ，Sydney 係排第7、第8嘅。That's how expensive it is. Some of the beachfront properties, riverfront properties are your Hong Kong pricing, right? So that's why a lot of these tech gurus all around the world are now buying properties in Sydney because they think it's a trophy assets, like having a home in LA, having a home in Bay Area, right? Brisbane, Thor, Chris Hemsworth. Moved the whole family back from LA to Byron Bay, and now Zac Efron, lives in Byron Bay and is going to marry the Aussie girl, right? So you're getting, outside of Melbourne, Sydney, other cities in Australia, such as Brisbane or Gold Coast, are being put on the world map, right? So I think they are up and coming, if not there already. Prices are hot, why I say prices are hot, just because Darren you say well Terence 你講嘅啫係咪先你做乜都得啦 right 咁但係你好多官方網站 you can go to realestate.com.au and you look at the auction clearance rate, right, which is in Australia they have weekly auctions on 有價有市 if the clearance rate is hitting 70-80% on 1,000 2,000 properties. It's not a one-off sample size. It's a pretty big sample size, right? 你一日可能話賣一個禮拜賣1000間，8成係有人買嘅。As a property investor, as a 業主，哇！2個禮拜前，我條街隔我3間買到2球澳紙。今個禮拜我想試下2球1、2球2啦 ，2.1、2.3 好正常啫。咁如果講緊 consistently 個 auction clear rate is hitting 80%, it shows me the demand supply, right? You put a price up, someone wants to take it.
I see. When before the show, I asked a lot of our audience and asked them what's the question they want to ask you. Yeah. And they said mortgage is a big thing because people always think that it's very hard to get a mortgage for a foreigner. What's your opinion on that and what is the usual procedure of that?
按揭呢個係一個好點講啊 ？It's 唔係話。特別容易 to be honest. It's not easy to get a mortgage overseas, right? But it also depends on your income verification. 你自己有幾多料先？你啲料係見得光唔見得光，定係真係全部 report 晒？你係交足晒稅？通常交足晒稅有晒 record 嘅。借錢你唔係太難嘅啫 ，right？ 你可能借到 somewhere between 60% LTV, right? It's pretty doable. I mean, outside of all the major banks. There's all these mortgage security funds, like they use mortgage-backed securities where they allow overseas investors to lend up to even 70-75%. But 我一般同我啲客講，你預借60%到啦，係咁即係預鬆少少。咁第一，即係同香港金管局一樣啫嘛。咁你借得少啲，咁你個 buffer 大咗，就算你有外匯嘅風險、政治嘅風險、樓市樓價。 低咗跌咗，咁你唔會負資產啫。
So we go back to 就係話 the person's credential really.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, there is still some leeway, and then your suggestion is that 60%, some buffer, like don't borrow too much then, and it's really about the person. Can they even pay the loan? In the first place? I see.
同埋我諗，如果你話要借到8成、9成去買一個海外物業，maybe you're not qualified for it. To be honest, I'm not just being honest, right？即係你買海外物業已經係你嘅 outside investment， 即係你係 core 裏邊已經可能話有香港有層物業啊，大陸有層樓啊，而家係想 diversify。咁但係如果你話 diversify， 你要搏到去8成、9成 LTV 嘅，不如買股票。
Yeah, no, it's good because our show is about honesty, right? And then it's great that you mentioned the whole thing. So, and I want to ask about what's the usual tax rate when it comes to buying Australian real estate for a foreigner perspective?
一般嚟講啦，咁佢有一個stamp duty 理印費嘅 surcharge 啦，咁大概 somewhere between 7至8% 度啦。OK。咁你話 tax rate 係 based on 你嘅 income tax， 不論你係個 rental income 又好，你個 capital gains tax 又好，都係當一個 a form of income tax。咁一般嗰個the basic bar， 即係個 starting bar 係 income 嘅32.5%，net income 嘅32.5%。So why I stress 點解我要講 net income 咧？唔係 gross 咧？你收到翻嚟個租金可能2萬蚊。但係中間好多嘢可以扣稅嘅，包括你中間要俾嘅差餉啊、管理費啊、按揭要還嘅利息啊，咁仲有新樓政府有啲 depreciation 係綁 as a 有啲 depreciation 可以扣，就 offset your gross income、之後扣晒所有呢啲咁樣嘅 deduction 之後咧，成32.5%。所以你話一般嚟講，啲投資者覺得哇32.5% 好高喎 ，right？ 但係同香港唔同。There's a lot of deduction, and one of the biggest deduction is the depreciation and your mortgage repayment, interest mortgage repayment.
I see. So like the world's changing really fast. What are some like takeaway you can allow the audience to know about what are some macro trends to be aware of when it comes to Australian real estate markets?
我覺得量化寬鬆啦全世界印緊銀紙 right? So it's important to and right now, I mean, we're in April 2021. The equity market is choppy, right? It's going up and down, right? Maybe a lot of people made a lot of money in 2020, right? And this year, it's looking like that's not the case, right? With various tension between countries and governments, right? 買磚頭保值 輸極唔會輸得 right? You're not going to lose 20 or 30% overnight. Australian market is booming right now. It's booming without Chinese students. So 當中國同澳洲傾掂數嗰陣時候I think there's going to be even a major uplift in the capital appreciation of Australian properties.
I see. It's funny because a few shows ago, we did one show with Asia Banker Club. It talked about Cambodia. And it talked about how there's a China bus effect, whereby before there's a Chinese tour bus to come and buy stuff, you should be there before too late because the Chinese will jack up the price. And then it sounds like that's the same thing as well in Australia.
No, it's different.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit different. I don't think China is going to jack up the prices. It's more people are buying properties without that rental yield that they were getting because there were a lot of Chinese students.
Oh, I see.
Overseas money.
Okay.
Right? Now, I can't comment on other countries, but I like to stress the point that you asked me previously, and I mentioned about the auction clearance rate, the transparency, the governing bodies. 個 system 健全啲，澳洲嘅 system 係有價有市，個二手 market 嗰個 liquidity 仲好過香港。Right? 即係早排香港嘅淨係一手樓買到嘅啫嘛，二手樓根本零 liquidity 嘅，太古城可能話3個月先一宗成交。我頭先講嘅 auction clearance rate，we're talking about the local liquidity of the Australian property market. 2,000 properties get sold every weekend, and 2,000 properties get auctioned off every weekend, and 80% get sold. 1,600間 that's more than Hong Kong.
So I remember when I started talking to your team, you guys talked about like, you guys feel like you want to tell Hong Kong more about what you guys are up to because you guys are expanding really fast, you guys do different markets.
Yep.
So what do you guys want to do? Like because I know that a lot of time agency in Hong Kong, they don't know what you're talking about. And you guys are very strong with your local expertise and having people on the ground to help you. Would you mind explaining a bit more about why it's so important for investors?
我諗由一開始做呢盤生意，喺唔同嘅亞太區賣海外物業。咁我一開始就係做澳洲 office is my core business right。我想俾人了解到或者係感受到喺澳洲生活其實係一樣咩嘢？我以前睇其他行家嘅 exhibition 啦，我記得有一次入到去賣 Sydney， 好記得。我問喂，我睇個 map 好靚啊，即係成個 Sydney Harbour map，成個 Sydney CBD map。我話賭場喺邊度？因為我睇唔到，我唔係特登去考佢。跟住佢話嗰邊，跟住我話 The rock is there man，it's on that side，right？ 即係我第一。我希望我哋係帶到一啲professional service， 即係唔好亂咁噏啦。第一，可能話你之前同我講，即係你賣緊英國樓，但係放一張 Manhattan 嘅相，即係我唔想有啲咁嘅嘢。你話係唔係每個地方每一個 suburb， 我啲同事或者我自己都咁熟？冇可能，我可以同佢講冇可能。即係我哋 cover 3個國家。澳洲、英國、加拿大，我冇可能同你講，我3個國家裏邊，我每一個省、每一個 city、每一個 suburb 都住過。That's a lie， 係咪？係咪 ？You're from States, right?
Canada.
Canada, right? I mean Canada 都加拿大都好大啦。
Oh, big place.
係咯。
Big place.
你話我去Great Ontario, and then you say you know I lived in Vancouver, I lived in wherever it may be.Calgary 你都唔信啦，係咪先？因為你河水不犯井水咁，係啦。咁呢個第一啦。咁第二就係話，我哋公司最起碼每一個國家每一個省有一個 project manager 去跟，希望係即係一個 project manager 跟一個國家，就唔會溝埋一齊。係啦。咁呢個我第三，我諗我亦都可以through training。同埋 product knowledge 咧，話到俾人聽，嗰邊嘅生活質素係點啊？嗰邊嘅嗰啲租客係點啊？嗰邊嘅 buyers behaviour 係點樣樣啊 ？We can convey that. And last but not least， 我哋喺呢啲 city， 我哋有一個 local 嘅對接人或者係自己同事 under Raeon 嘅，幫我哋去跟一啲奇難雜症，令到我哋香港或者係國內台灣嘅買家係唔需要打俾我哋澳洲嘅同事、加拿大嘅同事或者英國嘅同事。So it makes that process a lot easier. And we want to be there just like a PB, a private banker. We want to be the investment manager, but in real estate, in overseas real estate.
I see. So for the people who want to learn more about what you're up to, what any new projects, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
咁啊，梗係睇我哋 YouTube 啦，咁啊 subscribe 點擊撳一撳個鐘啦。咁我哋 Facebook 都好多嘢嘅，咁我哋網站亦都 regularly 有好多唔同嘅 update 嘅，係。
I see. Well, thanks for your time. And then next episode we'll talk about Sydney and then Melbourne. And thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts. And I really believe in that transparency and trust.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. You know, majority of you don't stick around this far. So we're flattered and truly appreciate your attention. To return the favor, let us tell you our thought on this episode.
In this episode, we answer fundamental questions on the Australian real estate market. Our guest is an insider, Terence Cheung, founder and CEO of Raeon International. For years, his company has served as an overseas real estate investment specialist for Hong Kong-based clients. From the macro trends to tax rates specifies, Terence distills his experience to help unpack the market. For investors, both overseas and domestic, it's crucial to be familiar with Australian tax rates, mortgages, schemes, and demand trends in order to participate in this energetic market. On top of these notable points of due diligence, there is also value in imagining what lifestyle and environment you want from your investment. We will be covering the booming Australian market in our next video as well, zooming in on Sydney and Melbourne. Please do not hesitate to reach out for any questions or comment through any of our social media listed below. As always, we hope you find the following content useful and informative. Enjoy.
We have a more detailed version of our thoughts in the show notes. Beside that, you can find more about the guests and all the tips and tricks we have mentioned in the show note too. Well, what do you think? Let us know in the comments section. Fun fact, do you know that more than 85% of you have subscribed to this show yet? Subscribe now to keep getting good stuff from us. Thanks for watching. What do you think of this episode? Please let us know in the comment below, and be sure to hit the subscribe button to keep in touch with us for upcoming videos. But before we go, I want to give a big shout out to Patina Design Lab. They're the one who help us in making our brand, art direction, as well as these videos. They are a strategic design consultancy firm to help businesses with a wide range of design services, from industrial design, branding, graphic design, art direction, content creation, and many more. They are a very talented bunch, and I urge you to check out their website for their work. That's all for today, and see you next time. Cheers.